was wondering. No, whatever.
Don't
I was
forget
wondering if
to
it was just
turn
gonna be
the
like,
stage amplification on.
All right. Greetings, everyone. Greetings, horror fans, and all of the virtual viewers that are joining us tonight. I am Midnight Researcher, and I will be the first to bid you welcome to the newest iteration of what everyone knows as the Midnight Society. However, this time, we come to you specially in virtual reality. Hosted by HorrorCon VR and in VR chat. I would go more into introductions, but I don't really have the time for that. Instead, what I really need to direct your attention to is this first tale of terror. Known by many as a classic, this can instill fear into some of the more critical thinkers of you out there. For my story, submitted for the approval and founding of the Midnight Society VR, Teddy by Anonymous. My sister had a teddy bear. A scary teddy bear. I don't know why, but it just creeped me out. It was just so disturbing to me. The thing had eyes that looked so real. It was as if it was made from a real bear, and its face was just blank and unsettling. I first started to get weird feelings around this bear when my sister first got it. She was only a baby at the time, and I was about 4. We had a dog, you see, and he had a habit of eating things, so my mother always had to put it up on the small cabinet in the corner of the hallway upstairs. Every time I went up those stairs, I saw that creepy bear suddenly glare around the corner at me, as if it was watching me. This wasn't the weird part. It started to get really weird about 5 years later. At the age of 6 or 7, my sister had lost interest in this bear, so my mother just threw it in the old toy cupboard. The only problem was that the cupboard was in my room. When I was 9, old enough to stay on my own and go to bed without any assistance, every night I would get into my bed, turn my lamp off. This is when things started to get really scary. As I was getting some sleep, I suddenly remembered my mom putting that teddy in the cupboard. I slowly turned to look over across my room to see it through the glass. My heart suddenly stopped as I thought about the horrors the plush had caused me. But at the age of 9, I wanted to grow up and lose my fears, so I just shook it off, put my head in the pillow. When I got up to pull my sheets on a bit further, I noticed something that would scar me for life. There sat, at the end of my bed, the teddy. My heart started beating normally again. I sat there, staring at it for about a minute. When I needed to yawn, I closed my eyes. I opened them to see the teddy sitting closer. At this point, I was really freaked out. I started to move back to the wall, looked around to see if there was any sign that anyone had come in. When I looked back to see the teddy on the edge of my bed, I was so startled that I almost fainted from fear. When I blinked, it had gone. I looked around. To my relief, I saw no sign of it. I set my head back down on my pillow, hoping for some sleep. I opened my eyes once more. It was above my head, staring straight down. I screamed as it lunged down at me. I will never see a teddy bear the same way again. This continued for a while. A long while. A few years later, after years of horror, I burned it. I sat in enjoyment as the bear was turned to smoking ashes in my fireplace. I had lived my teenage life through adolescence. The only thing I could remember that was in any way similar to my bad experience was when I watched Trainspotting. That fucking baby scene shocked me so badly, but other than that, all was well. When I turned 19, I was about to move into my new home. I had been given the keys to the house and was ready to set up my furniture. After hours of carrying, I moved the final box from the removal truck into the front door and shut the door behind me. I turned to go into the kitchen and put it on the table. I opened it to see a cabinet. I took it out, walked into my new living room, and placed it in the corner. I stared at it and thought to myself, I don't remember packing this cabinet. I didn't really care that much as I had just moved into my new home. I walked back into the kitchen to grab my television and brought it into the living room when I saw it. The teddy. It just sat sat there, staring at me with those realistic, blank eyes. It was beyond imagination, like something from a horror movie. My fears could not be contained, and whatever that bear or a demon possessing it was, it knew I was scared. I threw it in the garbage and put a cinder block over the lid as I slept in my bed that night, content and feeling a little more secure. Woke up that night and checked the time. 12. I heard a sound in the kitchen. I went into the kitchen, and I noticed the outside door was wide open, with muddy paw tracks leading into the kitchen. I saw that one of my knives was gone from its holder, and then I heard something creeping behind me. I hightailed it to my car and just drove. I looked in the rearview mirror and saw its face. It was holding a knife. I slammed the brakes. It flew through the front windshield, stood up, and it stared right into my eyes. I felt as if it was pulling me towards it. The only thing that would be coming towards it, though, would be my 2 front wheels. I rammed into it and felt a slight bump. Sighed in relief and drove. I just drove. Not even a minute after, I felt as if something was cutting at the bottom of my car, and my car ground to a halt. I went out to check it. There was a slash to my fuel tank. I ran for dear life to the nearest hotel to stay at. The only one was about a mile away, but I ran with every few feet, feeling like it was just one step behind me. Once I got to the hotel, I fell onto the bed with absolute exhaustion. I thought I was safe. But of course, when I woke up, it was at the end of the bed. That was my story for tonight. But now, I would like to introduce you to HorrorGoo here with his own tale. Please, sir, you take the stage.
Submitted for the approval of the Midnight Society. Crown of Thorns by myself. I'm starting this journal because I've been noticing some changes. Ever since I visited my local church, this place was terribly run down and seemed older than any of the surrounding infrastructure. Overtaken by branches and thorns, it looked like no one had renovated it in centuries. Normally, I wouldn't go to church, as I'm not a religious man, but an acquaintance of mine had recently passed and the funeral procession was held there. Before I talk about the changes, I suppose I should document what I think the cause is. The funeral went as normal as funerals go. However, what happened after was strange to say the least. I stuck around giving my condolences to their loved ones when I felt I needed to use the restroom. So, I looked around and couldn't find it. I asked the pastor where it was, and he led me to a door towards the back. Salvation at last. Upon opening the door, I was met with a strange scent, like a mix between metal and wine. It was sweet but off-putting. The room was covered in what I think may have been runes. In the center was one vine with a point on the end. I'm not sure what came over me, but I felt a pull to touch it. I even thought I heard whispering. I touched it and it pricked my finger. After that, I'm pretty sure I passed out, and the next thing I remember was waking up in the hospital. My head hurt something awful and I was terribly nauseous. They told me that someone had found me unconscious on the floor with significant blood loss. After a few days of tests and treatment, they couldn't find anything else wrong with me, so they discharged me. So now I'm writing in my old journal again because I've noticed some changes. Lots of tiny bumps have been forming a ring around my scalp. They're kind of pointy and they feel like a bone. I'm hoping it's just inflammation or something. It's been a few days since my last entry. Things have gotten worse. The bumps have formed into my crown. A full crown around my scalp with little horns at the top. I have a splitting headache that makes it impossible to do anything. I've been craving a sacrifice. Goat for some reason. I don't want to go back to the hospital. They couldn't figure out anything wrong last time. I don't know what came over me, but I'm pretty sure I just ate raw goat. The only thing I remember from last night was a farm and the taste of blood. And I just saw on the news that a farmer's livestock were slaughtered the other night. They think it was a chupacabra, but I'm pretty sure it was me. I was hungry. I don't even recognize myself anymore. I haven't left my house in weeks. I look divine. I look like a skeleton put on a skin coat that was 2 sizes too small. I tried to leave to get help, but something wouldn't let me. My own body refused to open the door. Can I even call it mine anymore? No. My vision is strange. I see a misty shroud around objects. It only goes away when sunlight shines through my windows. Too bright to see. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do it. Please believe me. I would have never hurt anyone. A few of my friends came to check on me. Now they're dead. A righteous offering. I think I ate them. In exchange for all the blood acquired from my rebirth, I shall transcribe a final page for your prosperity. It's been too long since I last inhabited a mortal. I'd print my name. However, there is no way to translate it to your simple language. My loyal follower led my new host body to the conduit most effectively. I proudly wear my crown of thorns once more, and my third eye is unobscured by the mortal's flesh. Its efforts to defy me were admirable, however futile. I am divine. The dream of resisting me was nothing but grand and intoxicating innocence. With my arrival, the flood shall soon begin. And that was my story. Next up is V.
Submitted for the approval of the Midnight Society. Lies on the Porch, by me, ImaginemonsterVi. It was a particularly warm May day in a small town. It was peaceful and quiet, and the sun was shining, unusual for a Saturday afternoon, when a lot of young people and couples would normally have fun in either meeting at a cafe or being at a park filled with trees and other plants. A present mild and gentle breeze stroked the branches and leaves of an old apple tree which was losing its pretty pastel rose petals, making itself ready to grow the delicate fruit which would be ready to be harvested in the coming autumn. Some of the petals got swept on the roof of a house which looked like it had already passed its best days. The white and light blue walls had cracked like an old porcelain doll on each corner. Dirt had been flung on the house by each storm, the muddy liquid dripping from the edge. It seemed like it could use some renovation, and only the windows looked like they've been taken care of. Through a certain curtainless window, you could see a neatly kept bedroom, a different look compared to the house from the outside. Light purple walls were decorated by a few white lines that had been placed separately to give the used home a modern touch. A tidied king-size bed with black leather garnishment and gray bed clothing with an artistic pattern was placed in the middle of a wall, a black medium-sized flat-screen TV facing parallelly. Next to it, on the other wall, was a seemingly expensive black closet with black glass accessorizing it. A close-by light brown door slowly opened as a man entered the small bedroom. The acceptably slender man was approximately 6 foot tall and quite pale. Thin, but not anorexic. His name was Francis, and seemed to be in his mid-20s, but he was actually 37. Pretty attractive for his age. The eyes were a metallic green-golden hue, which gave a touch to his pale skin and his short ink-black hair. He had just returned from a shower symbolized by a red towel around his waist and his brushed back with hair. Francis went to his closet, which reflected his silhouette through the black glass, and looked around thinking about what he should wear for today's occasion. Today he had a date with a lovely woman he had met a while ago in a cafe. The whole place was filled with people, and Francis was polite enough to offer the pretty lady a seat at his table, since he had no company anyway. Through the conversation they were having, they noticed a few things they had in common. They shared the taste in the same music, the same movies, and equal likings, so they decided to meet up again on the following weekend for a date. She insisted on meeting at his place, as he mentioned that the restaurant was closer to his house. Finally, he decided to go with the casual yet formal look. He put on some black skinny jeans, a white button-up shirt, and a black vest to it. Black leather shoes completed his look. After his hair had dried, his feet slowly dragged across the room out into the long wide hallway. Francis still had around an hour time till his date would come, but he liked being organized and to be done early. Sometime he'd just read, play Sudoku, or look at his phone in the meantime. His hand reached out to the door handle and had opened the white door which led to his porch. The porch between the front entrance and the back living room wasn't wide, but just as outspread as half of the house's hallway, where Francis had sometimes liked to spend time with reading. He sat at a small table at the back of the porch and looked at his phone as he received a message by his date Jade, informing him that she might take a little longer until she gets to him. The reply he gave was a simple, "Take your time, I can wait," which she just responded with a heart emoji. She was probably not done with her makeup yet, or she had to buy some groceries. Either way, Francis took it with ease as he opened her profile page, gazing at some of her pictures. Obviously, some people like looking at their crush's or date's profile. That's not a big secret, yet people don't like to admit it. Jade was a really gorgeous woman, 10 years younger than Francis, but that wasn't really a problem. She had dark brown straight hair that went past the shoulders, green eyes like freshly grown grass, delicate rose lips, which always had a beautiful smile framed by a few freckles. She may not have been the thinnest, but her curvy body was just perfect for a waiting date. A quiet buzzing sound suddenly distracted the man from his potential girlfriend to only look at the time on his display. It was 3:24 p.m. Then he glanced up and noticed a number of flies resting on his porch ceiling. He hated those pests with a passion and almost forgot that they liked coming to his place each time the weather spiked on a hot summer day. Francis got his house almost 2 years ago from his now deceased father. The house was first meant for him and his older sister Verena to share, but she declined the offer for her little brother to own his own place. The poor woman had no use for the crumbling building after her husband had passed away when their daughter had just turned 8 years old. And now, just 2 years ago, before he got the house, her daughter, who was 17 at the time, disappeared into thin air. She was last seen at a park hanging out with her troublesome friends. The search had been stopped after a short while, soon declared dead. Poor girl. A few minutes later, the buzzing got more of Francis' attention, as he actually tried to concentrate on his Sudoku game, which laid in front of him. The winged insect had stopped there resting and started flying around, either looking for food or just having an expedition around the place. Some of them just placed themselves on the table, and their movements distracted the impatient men. Francis usually was a very patient person, but in this case, he had zero tolerance with the flies. He closed his Sudoku book and placed it back in the corner of the table where he always left it. With a fine mind pencil in hand, he observed the little beings crawling around the table, their little snout tapping around the furniture to find any source of food, or them cleaning themselves with their tiny limbs. The suddenly fascinated man felt the urge to catch a fly and give it a closer look. Lucky for him, he also was very quiet and had a fast reflex when it was about catching insects. He had learned that task when he was younger, embedding this learned skill in his memories, and collected various insects from his parents' garden with his childhood friends. Without giving it a second thought, he raised his hand over a certain fly he picked in his mind and rapidly slammed his cupped palm over the fly. He didn't want to squish or suffocate it, only to leave a disgusting mess on his palm and table. His fingers slid underneath the small body, holding it gently inside of his fist. He felt the tingling sensation of the helpless fly that was moving around his palm as he snuck his index finger and thumb through the open gap of his fist to grab the fly. As he pulled the fly out by one of its wings, he inspected its tiny body curiously. A small head with 2 reddish-brown big round eyes, 6 black little legs, a grayish-black torso, and a gray to yellow ombre bottom. He then thought about what it actually was. Was it the belly? Was it the anus? Or was it the place where the heart nestled, just like ants? I don't think those things do even have a heart, or even a brain. Francis mumbled to himself quietly in his deep, soft voice as he chuckled. Then inspecting its head a little closer. Though, I do wonder what would happen if something would sting its head. His fine mind pencil twirled between his fingers as he steadily held the fly in place. Let's see. Compared to it, the mind would be as thick as a pole. But that fact didn't bother him as he slowly penetrated the mind tip into the fly's head and pulled it out when he felt as if had reached the other half of its head. The fly didn't struggle anymore. It was just frozen. Was it dead? Francis asked himself as he loosened his fingers from the fragile body. No, it didn't fly away, nor did it crawl away. But it did get back up with its legs. Just frozen in place. That was odd, but so fascinating to Francis that he wanted to see if all flies reacted like that to a head penetration. So he repeated the process to a few more flies he caught, till he actually started making his own game out of it. Each fly that stayed like that, he'd place them in a line like soldiers. And each fly that gave up and died or started to get its consciousness back and slowly crawl away, he'd remove parts of the fly and place it in a corpse pile of flies where it wouldn't be able to move anymore and would pretty much just stop living. Once again, the prideful man got distracted from his game by a cough that came out of his mouth. He held his hand tapped to his mouth as he kept coughing, his throat aching with each throbbing hack. Oh no, I can't get sick now. This is a horrible timing, he croaked in between muffling coughs. Francis stood up and went inside to get a glass of water, thinking he might be a dry throat or something. His phone buzzed again as the cold liquid cooled his neck. He picked up afterwards to view the new text message he had received from his date partner. The navigator said, I only have 10 minutes till I get there. Realizing that he'd have to clean up the flies' mess before she would see them, so he could avoid any disturbed thoughts from Jade, he walked out of the porch. Gazing down at his masterpiece of the miniature mountain of decaying insects, the man couldn't help himself but feel a sense of pride as he looked at his army of immobile, brain-dead flies. The feeling of being a dictator overwhelmed him. But before he began to get rid of the flies, he noticed a remaining fly on the wall. As he side-eyed the remaining fly, his cough started again. Only having little time, he just slammed his palm on it to eliminate it. When the coughing man looked at the small mess he made on the wall, he couldn't believe what he saw. The fly was definitely squished in place, but next to the disgusting yellowish mucus the fly had left behind was also a tint of red blood. He'd often killed flies with a pellet, but he had actually never seen a fly bleeding. He was surprised and confused at the same time. While the coughing didn't stop, he felt like something was actually stuck in his throat. Tickling dry spots. He swung his fist against his chest repeatedly to help himself clear out whatever was there. Probably just a crumb of the old hard bread he had to eat with butter and honey today. When he caught the thing causing his fit up the floor, Francis was in utter disgust when he saw a dead fly covered in his saliva. How did it get there? He had no explanation how he could have swallowed a fly. Maybe by accident as he was sleeping? Or maybe he had tried eating that bread? He didn't know and was completely puzzled. As his cough began once again, and it was getting worse, Francis only witnessed that the fly wasn't actually dead. He watched it crawl out of his saliva and fly away after it had shook the thick fluid from its tiny body. His natural pale skin, which usually had a tint of a warm color, went fully white, a sickening pale color out of disturbance, and he suddenly felt like he would not be getting any air because of his coughing. He felt like someone had stuffed a whole cooked potato down his throat, and he tried to crawl back up as he tried to get it out. Through his harsh cough, another fly flew out of his mouth, then another, then two, then three, until a swarm of flies was leaving his body. Francis couldn't move. He couldn't do anything than just watch in horror as those insects formed a black cloud after successfully escaping out of his mouth with an all too familiar buzz. He couldn't breathe. He was suffocating and frozen in place. His vision started to fade, his skin turned blue, and his eyes rolled back with tears streaming past a few escaped flies on his face. It was all over when his world turned black. And as the last fly was flying out of him, his limp body fell to the floor like a dead fish on dry land. As Jade arrived and entered his garden, he had left unlocked, she walked over to his porch to find the pale man lying by her feet. A scream could not be silenced as she saw him. His gaped mouth was an obvious sign for the need of oxygen, and his milky white eyes were so heavily rolled back, his iris was hidden in the back of his head, tears drying on his skin. The horrified woman who began to cry ran off to her car and called an ambulance on her phone, which she then left on the passenger seat. A detective who was closing the case was jotting down all the conclusions. Francis Chase died on 12th of May 2016 at the age of 37. Cause of death was a common case of asphyxia, the doctors exclaimed. The autopsy showed nothing that could have caused his death. He was a clean and healthy man. No signs of sickness, no sign of smoking. The only odd thing was found in his stomach next to his meal was a dead fly. His last activity didn't show anything odd that could be pointed towards his death either. Only a Sudoku book and a fine mind pencil lay close to his body on the floor, assuming he was playing it before he started suffocating. This mysterious case will be closed immediately, and it will be not mentioned on the news as a request from the only known living relative of Francis, his sister Verena S. And this was my story. And now it's the turn of Grim Reaper.
Very cool.
Hello everyone, this is Dr. Grimm, and this is the last story, and the only reason you should fear what relies in the unknown. This story is submitted for the approval of the Midnight Society. I'm a marine biologist, and this is why the deep ocean shouldn't be explored, by Snipa6407. What started it all happened in early 2019. When the first mutilated dead whale washed up on shore. The happening was not very uncommon. The occasional dead whale would wash up on shore once in a while, but the whale carcass, or what was left of the carcass that washed up in 2019, was different, and much, much more disturbing. The whale was huge, a humpback whale, but that was just one of the species that the scientists suggested it could have been. On a sunny evening in the middle of July, I was walking down the shore when I stumbled upon the carcass. It was massive. But you want to know the disturbing part? Only the lower half of the whale washed up on the shore. Only the tail and back fins flimsily hanging onto the gruesome lower half of the body. The entire lower half of the body was scarred and it was wounded. Only the pale colors of the carcass allowed me to identify the creature as a whale. It looked so god-awful. It looked as if something took a huge bite out of the whale. For starters, a huge section of the carcass was ripped out. Gigantic scratch marks covered the rotting skin of the whale. After discovering the whale, I took a picture of the whale and I called 911. They came, covered the carcass with a trap, and they went in and sent some researchers over from Washington. And oh boy, that was only the beginning. A local fisherman whose name was Travis was on his boat, fishing for tuna offshore. He recalls that while he was reeling in a huge yellow-tailed tuna fish, he spotted something moving beneath the surface of the water. At first it looked like a shark fin, but the shark fin was black and it was rigid and bony, and that was when Travis realized that the shark fin wasn't a shark fin. It was a spike. At the same moment, Travis looked down at the water, and all he saw was darkness. Not darkness as in the water had turned black, darkness as in something in the water was blocking the sunlight from entering the water. Something so huge, absolutely enormous, was swimming under Travis's boat. Travis said that previously thought shark fin immediately disappeared underwater, and after a few seconds the shark fin spike reappeared along with hundreds of other spiked fins, all moving in alignment. The thing under Travis's boat looked to be 900 meters long. It stretched out into the distance. He couldn't see the head or the tail of the creature. Previously thought shark fins looked to be attached to whatever was moving under his boat, moving along with the creature beneath the boat. After 5 terrifying minutes, the tail of the creature could be seen from a distance, and it was based on Travis's account terrifying. The tail alone looked to be around 100 meters long. It was rigid and bony, prehistoric looking, and algae covered. Travis stayed on his boat until the creature left. He drove back to the shore, and the only time he told anyone was when he was extremely drunk at a bar. He was traumatized. A few days later, 5 more mangled and attacked whale corpses washed up on shore. This, however, was not dismissed and taken so easily by the community. The dead whales attracted huge crowds, and eventually the town council was pressured into digging deeper and finding answers. Eventually, the police and the community cleanup crew arrived at the scene. Due to the carcass's enormous size, they had to be destroyed with explosive devices and chainsaws. Not too pleasant and not too animal friendly, if you ask me. The beach was turned completely red for a few weeks. Over a few weeks after that, deep-sea fishermen and sailors reported seeing an enormous shape beneath the water, so huge, so massive, that they couldn't see the end of it. More horribly mangled dead whales and sometimes even great white sharks kept washing up onto the shore again, and more people saw the enormous and unknown creature far offshore. And as stupid and cliché as it sounds, more and more people wanted answers. And them being the stupid rednecks they are, they wouldn't give up. The community pressured the city council to send submersible down into the ocean to investigate, and after a month, when strangely there was no more strange activity, that's what they did. The city council hired a team who could operate a submersible, and they sent them down in the general direction of where the creature was last seen. Most people expected the submersible and its crew to discover some giant and undiscovered creature, and they were only half wrong. They did discover the creature. It lay at the bottom of the seafloor, its true hugeness being revealed. The crew of the submersible said that the creature looked like a 900-meter long monster. Only the creature's skin was plated with black scales covering its entire body. Its tail was exactly how Travis described it, bony and rigid, fin-like spikes lining the top surface of the tail. But they couldn't completely confirm if the creature was a giant dinosaur-type creature because it had no head. Something else had killed it already. Something much, much bigger and something much more dangerous. I feel like I should say the bulk of this town's population is made up of saltwater fishermen and hunters, so both those activities are a huge factor in this town's economy. Cryptozoology is also a big factor here. This town is where the world likes to dump its weird shit, aka the town of Skinwalker Ranch. Lots of weird shit goes on around here. UFO sightings, unknown creature attacks, demon summoning rituals, unexplained disappearance, you name it all. If almost all the population didn't own guns, we would all be dead by now. However, there's one slight aspect that sets this town apart from others. This is an abundance of strange agents who belong to a vague organization. Other than that, it's your run-of-the-mill small town on the shoreline. If I forgot to mention, I'm a marine biologist. I'll say it now. I'm a marine biologist and my career is one of the reasons I decided to move into my seaside town. By the way, my name is Roger Rogers. It's a weird name, I know. The job isn't as exciting as I imagined it. I didn't always go into submersibles exploring the deep blue sea. My job mainly consisted of staring at some dead fish for a couple of hours and then writing some study notes. And since I was a marine biologist, I decided to go look and investigate the matter of the dead Leviathan. The local government covered up the findings by saying the submersible team discovered an extremely rare communal pack of great white sharks, which was total BS, and that they were responsible for all the dead whales. Eventually, I found a guy with a submersible to take me to the location. So the plan was, go to the location of the dead creature, examine it, assume what the beast could have killed it, and that lay dead in the murky depths of the ocean. So on one Friday afternoon, I found myself boarding a 3-person submersible along with my driver, Benjamin, or Ben if you are lazy. Ben was skinny and short and had curly brown hair and light skin. Adjusting to the cramped space the submersible offered, I sat down and introduced myself to Ben, for I did not know his name at the time. Ben flipped several switches, pulled a black lever, and some other stuff that I couldn't recognize. And then the submersible slowly descended into the blue water, the light slowly disappearing as we went deeper. I feel I should say that the feeling of going underwater, even though the safety of a submersible, is amazing. The feeling is mesmerizing. It's as if you are entered through a portal to a whole new world. A completely different environment. Dozens of tiny fish darted away from the submersible's porthole as larger animals like sharks came into view. We ended up going to a location far away from the shore where the carcass of the Leviathan was located. When the people who hired me told me how big the creature was, I knew it was big, but up close it was enormous, even bigger than I would have ever imagined. The rotting carcass that was once a great beast sat on the bottom, covering a large amount of distance with its dead body. I nodded. Let's get started. Can you move the submarine at an angle where I can see the slide's neck? Already on it. The submersible turned and moved a little to the left, and I could see the stump where the creature's head had once been. It was a clean cut, not much gore. Most of the blood and guts were being swarmed by hungry scavengers and sharks. A true feeding frenzy. From what I could tell, the animal that killed the Leviathan must have been territorial, not hungry, since not much of the creature was eaten, only the head. And judging by the fact from the circular and lined marks and wounds on the skin of the Leviathan carcass, the animal that killed the Leviathan must have been territorial, not hungry, since none of the carcass was actually harmed. That put an immediate thought into my head. A squid, a huge oversized monster squid, must have killed the Leviathan. Of course, this theory was not a very reliable one, but still the best I could come up with. But something didn't add up. The Leviathan had bite marks engraved into its skin, huge, deep bite marks. Squid, octopus, and any kind of squids that had beaks, but they didn't have mouths or teeth. So what had hooked tentacles and razor-sharp, fleshing-ripping teeth? Nothing, at least nothing scientifically, that has been discovered yet. Ben waved his hand in front of my face and grinned. Hey Roger, you zoning out? I shook my head. No, I was just thinking whatever did this was territorial. It killed the Leviathan because it was in its territory, not because of the hunger. And whatever killed the Leviathan had hooked tentacles. Thank you for listening. This was my story and written by Snipa6407.
And I believe that will have to do it for at least the stories of this first session of Midnight Society VR. However, seeing as we do have some time left, if any of you in the audience want to ask questions relating to our stories or ourselves, we will now open up the Q&A for anyone to ask. So please, feel free to step forward for the time we have left. You might not get another chance at this.
Oh, I will.
Go on, sir, please.
All right, name's FD. Good day, everyone. So I just wonder, with all of the stories basically that you did during the past few years, from all of you, who inspired you the most to create all those horror stories? For all the inspiration for basically trying to the main author inspiration for you to do like horror stories such. That's all. Thank you.
HorrorGoo and V, I think this is for you.
I mean, I can go first if you want. V.
Me?
Oh, do you want to go first? Or do you want me to go first?
No, you go first.
Okay.
Okay. Anyone can go first. I will.
If we're talking like real authors, I would say definitely like Stephen King. I read a lot of those books.
Of course.
And the movie adaptations as well. Growing up, I've always loved religious horror. So anything that involves deities and especially Christian themes and such, I enjoy stories about that. Creepypasta authors, my favorite's probably Cosby Daff, author of a lot of good ones. One of them I won't really say the title of because it not safe for Twitch chat, but
I know
Godzilla NES for sure is one of my favorites. So.
Oh, yeah. Okay. All right. Thanks.
And V can also answer that question because V wrote her story as well.
Yeah, we go for
okay.
it.
Okay. Well, basically, when it comes to horror, I literally just grew up with it. Since I was a very tiny toddler, I know that's not very healthy for a tiny child to be exposed to horror, but that's how it happened. And then I got older. With 12, I found creepypasta, and I always had like this mind of horror, basically, because I grew up with it. So the inspiration for my own story was literally the porch from my grandfather that was filled with flies. I didn't really have other inspirations. I just sat there, I drew, I didn't do the things that were in the story, no, but I just saw the flies and I was like, maybe I could make that into a horror story. That's it, I have the idea. It's not hard for me to get ideas, and that's actually a curse sometimes. Mostly when you don't often have motivation to write.
Dang, wow, that was interesting idea. So, well, all right. Anybody else?
Remember, there is a place where you can step up and ask questions if you want to. It's in the middle there.
Oh, okay, but thank you for the answers. Anyways.
Please, anybody else can step up and ask.
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
I was just kind of curious for the four of you. What is your favorite genre of horror? Like to write or read stories about?
For me personally, I always like the mystery stories, the ones that are really long and involve a protagonist uncovering some kind of hidden truth at the end through tangible facts, mysterious creatures, and that kind of thing. I really like. It's not exactly a mystery, but HorrorGoo mentioned it as well. NES Godzilla that brought a lot of both tangible things that were able to be described, as well as a lot of more emotional and intangible subject matters that were brought in. It was kind of this beautiful mix of things, and it led into one hell of a video game horror story. But secondary to that, I would say I really like the creature-centric ones. Not the ones that we've heard over and over, like Slender Man or what have you, but again, just a new kind of cryptid. That story that Dr. Grimm just told there, I enjoyed that very, very much, just because it's something new, something. It's like a threat, a tangible threat that could be haunting any one of you out there.
Thank you.
And I think
I would
yeah.
say like those kind of stories that I narrate, and also true stories, but not like true stories that there was a break-in, but true stories that are more detailed, more horrific. Because if it actually happens, it's more terrifying because it's not imagination. It's just thing that has happened, but people refusing to believe that these kind of things happen. Creepypasta is great, but I would say like there is a factor to a thing that is more probable and more possible that has happened already. And I would say after that maybe the SCP Creatures and Universe and the Foundation, but that could also fall into the category of creatures because it's a new
I do love SCPs.
continuity.
V, your answer?
Well, for me, it's very simple. I either like true stories, kind of horror, paranormal true stories, psychological horror, or surreal horror. I just like that stuff, really. And yeah, it's like the fear of the unknown most of the times, because that's very important when it comes to horror. And I mean, I'm in the fan base of creepypasta, which is obviously divided by two because some people don't even realize that it's about horror stories. But yeah.
All right, and HorrorGoo?
That was my answer.
Thank you.
Well, I already said that I really like religious horror, but as well, cosmic horror and just thrillers.
Yeah.
I like slow psychological horror. I like when things change, or like when the horror comes from inside of a person, or it's incomprehensible. I tend to like that sort of thing. SCPs fit into that as well, a lot of them. But I do like the creature horror too. Just big monsters and gross things. So I'm a simple man.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Anybody else want to step up? We have about 10 minutes remaining. We can fill that time in with more questions.
Before the next question, I remember the Night Researcher. Your avatar looks like a character from Persona 2, right?
Yeah, the creator of my avatar does Persona-styled avatars. Yes, I got it for last year's HorrorCon at all.
I do love Persona so much, man. It was just an amazing series, especially Persona 5. It was lovely.
Thank you.
Continue.
You have a question?
I have a question, actually. So
Okay.
for all of you, what is the most scared that you've ever been? For literary reasons or otherwise?
The most scared I've ever been. That would probably be the day that it was when I was a kid. I was out on my bike with a couple of friends, and I went way too far out, and I did not know where I was. I had an old burner cell phone at the time, and I actually ended up dropping it into a creek that's sort of near my area, so I couldn't call my friends or family. I ended up lost, and it was basically like that for about 4 hours, going through various streets and forest trails until I did actually manage to find my way back. But there was just that sort of almost an existential fear that, like, oh, something could happen to me. And at least it wasn't like this at the time, but I thought it was like this at the time, that I'm so far away from everything else that nobody would know what happened to me. They just thought I'd go missing, that kind of thing. That is probably the most scared I've ever been, and that was over 10, 12 years ago by this point.
So, HorrorGoo, do you want to say your experience next?
Yeah, it's a little real and is an experience that I think a lot of people went through, especially in the last 2 years. When I got COVID last year and it put me in the hospital, I had never been in the hospital before, and it was terrifying. And I honestly, it was the first time in my life I ever thought that I was really going to die. So that, looking back at it now, it was not as bad as I remember it, but it was definitely traumatic. It was the first time I had ever called and told someone that, like, if something bad happened to me, that I loved them. I really was worried about passing from it, which luckily I didn't. I'm still here, so yeah, that was scary.
I have many, like, I would say, like, as some people know, I have had quite a bit of my own share of heart attack, but I would say, except for diseases, I would say mine was like 8 years ago. Me and my friend were at a party, and he got drunk, and I was dropping him off on a bike, and we were followed by two bikers, and they insulted my friend. My friend insulted them. It came to a fight, and my friend ran away, and I was stabbed once in the face, below my ear, but luckily I kicked both of the bikers in their groin area, and I fled with the bike. Your turn, V.
I mean, the thing with me is I don't necessarily have normal fears. I never really had a moment where I could say I was really scared. I am mostly maybe under panic when it's like stress or something, but I never was really truly scared. The only fear that I have personally is just of passing away all alone and being forgotten. That's all, really.
Interesting subject matter with interesting answers from each of us. So if anybody else has a question, I think we have time for maybe two more.
Yeah, I don't know if you actually got this question already, but was this whole segment based on a really old, like, obscure 70s Canadian horror show?
Are you afraid of the dark? Yes.
Yeah, I thought that was
70s?
funny.
That's 90s. That's
I know
90s.
I'm an idiot.
90s.
I know. I meant 90s. I mixed up my numbers because I'm a
That's okay.
moron.
That's okay. Yeah, but yes, I'm a big fan of Are You Afraid of the Dark, and I felt it would be a good idea to bring the Midnight Society into virtual reality like this, and so far seems to be going pretty good.
Anyone has any other questions? Feel free.
Okay,
What is that?
so wait, okay, I have a question. What it feels like to be in a community that you're happy to write your own scary stories and to receive some good reception of the stories itself? How does it make you feel?
I think this is for, again, HorrorGoo and V, so...
Well, since technically, as I said before, I grew up with horror, and it's basically a big part of my life, and I poured my heart into it, and I actually have more ideas, but I just don't have the motivation at the moment. I actually feel very amazing. I feel appreciated that something that I created would be liked by other people.
Like, for example, when I've read your story, Flies on the Porch for the first time, while also checking if it's good for narration, to be quite honest, Flies on the Porch literally scared my life in the fear of flies itself. Wondering if I'll ever see fly, I'll be like, oh shit, I'm Francis now.
No, you're not Francis. Don't worry. You'll
Yeah,
be
but
fine. If you
yeah, we'll see.
if you don't kill them like that, you're fine.
Let's hope so.
The HorrorGoo, you have an answer?
Let's hope so.
Yeah, it is nice. I've been writing since at least middle school. Wasn't always great back then, but I think I've gotten a little better. I haven't written anything in a while, so this was a good excuse to write something. So I'm excited to see people's reactions to it.
Well, I mean, personally, for what I've heard so far right now, you are so talented and incredibly amazing when it comes to narrating, writing your own stories.